Everyone on this planet has enjoyed the taste of a cartoon at least once in their lifetime. That's why we have epitomes of greatness like Bob the Builder Festival of Fun for PlayStation 2. And with that Blast Entertainment logo on it, the world knows quality is going to be imprisoned onto this disc. Plus, when the word fun is in the title of anything, it's never a lie, which is of course the case here. I don't believe I've ever had as much fun as I did wheeling around in muck, scraping up garbage, drawing lines in the grass with Scoop, or taking the analog stick, spinning that bitch with Dizzy. I always knew Bobbert wouldn't lie to me. It's exactly what I needed to lather up my hole, setting an expectation for what's to come. If I'm not all giddy with excitement oozing out of every orifice, flailing my hands around in the air as much as I was during my Bob the Builder Festival of Fun session while playing other cartoon video games, life isn't worth living. I require more moments similar to my video game wrench being so dysfunctional, hardly registering my inputs, making this a harder task to do than it is in real life in the upcoming Cartoon Conquest. And Transformers Mystery of Convoy better satiate that newly uncovered fetish. Or the real title is this. Regardless of what you call it, this is an undeniable classic in the gaming Bible, known for having the challenge of being locked in a cage, club in hand, with an expectation of taking down 2 rabid panthers. Gamers everywhere have tried, then gamers died of a heart attack from their blood pressure skyrocketing to unseen degrees while trying to perform the kindergartner level task of simply finishing a level. You need to deal with movement fluidity that feels as if you are stomping through quicksand while you're blasting away at jet fighters with your blue raspberry gumballs, attempting to avoid their shots that are beyond preposterous to avoid, which is funny cause the game expects you to be pinpoint accurate with your shits, hitting the perfect pixel on enemies to take them down. It's nonsense. I got my first game over in under 15 seconds. It's an absolute atrocity attempting to survive for even the smallest amount of time. This is one of those games you are required to take prescription stimulants, taping your eyes open like you're a living Courage the Cowardly Dog scene, gluing your entire existence to the fat-ass tube TV. Then, to add more rat poison to the cup of joe, you only have 2 lives, no continues, and no passwords either, making these levels a nightmare. What's really off the goop, though, is how the bosses are room temperature IQ difficulty. None of them do anything aside from sit there or move up and down, shooting a couple dots at you, taking 5 to 6 hits to destroy. Is it supposed to be a treat of some kind? You sit there dealing with a bowl of nuts and bolts for breakfast, grinding all your teeth into inverse pyramids, so they give you a bone toss of a brain-dead Decepticon logo as a boss battle. A very in-depth way to express creativity, if I say so myself. Who doesn't expect to see a fucking logo as 2 of the bosses in a game? To my understanding, these scuffles are one of the only actual mentions of Transformers throughout the game, along with a few of the other bosses and your playable character, Ultra Magnus, being stuck into that pool as well. I myself don't know much about Transformers or know who Ultra Magnus is, but if anyone out there has any information to explain how or why he is as pathetic as he's portrayed here, I'd love to have that knowledge dumped into my cranium, cause at this point, I think I'd rather take one of Robert's anthropomorphic Ladies of the Night automobiles as my character. I have confidence they'd be able to flatten each and every ship in these cookie cutter levels, then drop a few emotes afterwards. But no, we can't have that. We're stuck with our robotic mechanism who had his CPU dunked into water, getting obliterated by dots on cooldown. Transformers Mystery of Convoy has to be one of the hardest games from the NES era, without a doubt. You're just sticking a cartridge in to relentlessly be punished at every angle, getting stabbed in the gut repeatedly, shank twisted, soap dropped in the shower during prison power hour, also witnessing a surreal amount of laziness, which is kind of a shock to me considering how short the game is. On top of the Decepticon logo boss battle thing, we got the classic level 6 is level 3 backwards, and a recolor as icing on the cake. The only reason I could ever see a person spending hours of their life on this thing is if they were trying to legitimately Alexander the Great themselves through it as some sort of an accomplishment, which is a move not a lot of people will make. They'll presumably quit after a short time to play a game that's going to lighten the mood, like grand old Nickelodeon Party Blast. Right when you turn this bad Larry on, you are blessed to witness the Data Design Interactive logo, a company that stems just as deep as Blast Entertainment in gaming lore. I mean, we're talking about 2 members of the 4 Horsemen here after all, and these guys, as usual, did not miss the delivery. They give us options to pick between a handful of Nick characters, Invader Zim, Angelica, Big Jim. I decided to go with SpongeBob, entering the battleground of hurling food at whichever creatures or children that decided to step in the direction of Bikini Bottom's famous warlord, who is ready to catapult floor burgers, fries, and squirt milk from baby bottles. Is it unparalleled levels of elation? Of course not. The way I see this is like early 2000s brain rot. Before the days of artificial retention manipulation, people had time wasters of dunking pies into characters' faces after Shang Tsung tore their life force out through their throat. The situation is as mindless as it comes off, with a seasoning smeared on of sticking in AI that hardly has any idea what it's doing. And if you somehow are too dense to find this slobber knocker of a minigame as anything else than primetime entertainment, you can scurry on over to another vintage minigame where you're running around slamming piping down on the ground to fuel up a rocket ship that hardly functions. I had plenty of moments where I'm pressing the button to stick my pipe down and it just wouldn't place. And when it did, I had no idea how to make the rocket itself fuel up and lift off. I was doing exactly what the rules were telling me to do, but I wasn't getting shit out of it. So I'm led to believe the minigame in of itself is just bugged, which wouldn't be remotely close to a stunner. This was published by the same Long Way Corn Eaters who created Monster Trucks, then cloned it 2 more times into separate games. Nick Party Blast is just one of the few instances where Data Design got their hands on a big dog license, then ran with it to release a game as quickly as humanly possible. Seriously, what is the logic behind releasing a party game that has 5 minigames in total? If we continue on with the wine poured from the golden goblet, you're able to play rollerblading basketball, where you spend more time having your skull cracked against the pavement than you do standing up moving around. The AI, yet again, is struggling to exist in their prison, getting stuck at the bottom of the screen, forgetting they're supposed to be participating in the barnyard games. We're Ubered another game that is incredibly similar to the first Food Fight one, where we run around shooting people with a squirt gun that lasts for 3 whole minutes. I'd love to know why. I find it hard to fathom that a person could sit there without their attention span fading after 20 seconds while playing this. Then finally, they added a remake of Tubin from the 90s that is essentially unplayable. I was making my way down the raging rapids and I could hardly control myself, move, or get points. I didn't even know where I was half the time. You're constantly getting smacked around, flipped over, unable to move, getting flushed down the drain. This shit is impossible. These guys are expecting you to complete 5 levels of this too, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's an outlandish expectation for a person, no matter the sins they've committed. For me, the better idea was to give up on this and go test my mettle against a game highlighting a singular Nickelodeon star, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, that I'm sure will be as much fun as creating the wrong concoction in a lab that melts all your skin off. When I inevitably ripped myself off of the matchbox, I loaded into this horrific looking environment that let me taste the sweat droplets of the knuckled in overtime hours that were stuck into Big Jim's game with each step I took, with the overarching goal of collecting 6 trophies in this theme park, I think it is. After I took a roller coaster ride that plummeted Jimbo towards the pavement, I discovered a local who informed me on how there are cool games inside of this arcade. And what are those claimed cool games? Well, I got to play one where I hit a little spiky ball at asteroids with a baseball bat, rewarding me with a trophy of a fish. I played this fucking demonic 2D shooter that has one of the backgrounds from Dynamite 100, letting me blast more cheese balls at space rocks and ships. You know, God bless Chester for giving us the cheese ball. All these games seem to be massive fans. It's a shame you weren't able to live up to his standards when it comes to quality, though. Why you'd make the decision to have the player's projectiles get blocked by other projectiles is a question that needs answering. Fighting regular enemies, or more importantly, the flying fortress boss at the end of the level, is unreasonably challenging because you're hardly able to deal damage half the time. A majority of your shots during this fight are getting blocked, and this ship eats you alive in 2 hits. Good on you guys to make something as simple as a 2D shooter look like an ancient alien artifact that has never entered our stratosphere. I hated every second of this, and my time on it did not last long. When this debacle came to a close, I was able to play the final cool game that was just me taking pictures inside of a photo booth. So I'm not sure why the bitch outside lied to me. 2 of these were not games, and the one that was is not cool. Still, I got my 2 trophies, continuing on, finally reaching the platforming segments that were nowhere close to an obstacle, nor did they have any thought behind them. I assumed due to this being the tutorial stage, that's the reason I was witnessing one-dimensional hydraulic press versus brain levels of platforming, with the later levels truly building that festival of fun for me. And once I trudged down the tutorial line, gripping onto my prizes, finishing up the level, I discovered the festival of fun was only a myth foretold in ancient literature. When the real game begins, each level has a task of spelunking through whatever environments you're plopped into, searching the area for Jimathan's fellow Cretan friends, or finding items on the floor. But if you do want to take a break to play more of that outer body experience of a 2D space shooter, you can do that. I found a few more of those to sink my teeth into, where it became even more apparent to me how disgusting this thing is. You got groups of enemies flying in, launching a barrage of Twizzlers at you, and health pickups are very scarce, so you'll typically end up getting fried, losing the 3 lives you're given in the blink of an eye. I genuinely hope these are always optional, otherwise I could see a player holding up the white flag, surrendering to the opposing army, packing their bags, hiking their way to a land far, far away just so they don't need to deal with it. And it may seem like I'm hyper fixating on this one pointless minigame, because I am, but also there isn't really much to say about what's going on in the main playthrough. Boy Genius has you jumping across platforms, going from area to area, with the only challenge being faulty game design, from them stretching a few of those said jumps to the absolute maximum, so you need to stick your toe on the very edge of a platform, getting the most you can out of your jumps. It's really not the most riveting time you'd spend sailing across the 7 seas. They just gave James Neutron fans soulless gunk hot off the press, where I'm sure those dumbass kids had no idea what hit them. They just sat in their chairs, mouth like a leaky faucet, floating in cyberspace, waiting for emotion.exe to run. You gotta love games that make smooching a full-speed belt sander come off as a thrilling time. Alright, I think we gotta take a step away from Nickelodeon for a little bit. Besides, Cartoon Network is where it's at anyways. Nick didn't have Powerpuff Girls on it, a quintessential franchise in the cartoon universe that has a vintage game called Powerpuff Girls Chemical Extraction. When you start, you select from one of the 3 puffs to battle against an opponent from the show, show who is relentlessly tossing heat-seeking objects right into your face that you can hardly avoid. Doesn't matter if it's a couch, a chair, a lamp, it could be a torn down plane from the sky, that shit isn't going to miss. And as Bubbles, my way of defending myself was using those same objects, just kicking them instead, hoping they land. Why you aren't able to pick up objects is beyond me. It would probably make the fights a bit more entertaining if you could. Either way, I was trying my best to conform to these Stone Age conditions, since I figured it would be the most efficient way of hammering down at the underworld creatures, but apparently I took a fat sip from the brain-damaged water fountain for thinking such a thing. I cannot believe I didn't think to just walk at them, wailing on my attack button, hoping Bubbles' surge of slaps will outdamage my opponent, allowing me to win. It was a technique that worked until the AI started going into overdrive. Once the goons started becoming more aggressive, you need to transition that tactic of walking in, pressing your attack button without thinking, to jumping in the air, pressing your attack button without thinking, repeatedly spamming your downwards nuclear kick. Nothing screams more amusement than being forced to spam one move to win. No joke, if you don't do this, your character will be used as a sled to be surfed down a bed of spikes, not having the ability to move or do anything as these guys pummel you into the dirt. I am so gracious it only took me a handful of minutes to discover this forbidden tome. I used it to blaze my way through the entire game, finishing Bubbles story mode in 10 to 15 minutes like an animal, to where I could continue on with one of the other puffs. Why you'd want to do that is definitely stuck in the stank cyclone. The only difference between the three is their special move that you can activate after picking up 3 chemical X bottles. I never gave a hoot to use it though. The downwards kick is by far the most powerful move any entity has ever had the displeasure of eating for lunch, and it can fold this entire game into an origami seagull. With that said, I still find it to be an erotic moment to hit the god roll during a trip in the coal mines. I've never heard of this game before once in my life, and it has to be one of the worst games on the PlayStation. Realistically, it would only take you around an hour if you wanted to finish the whole game with the 3 girls. But keeping in mind how all the playthroughs are going to be identical, going against the same characters on the same levels, spamming the same attack, most would only do it once, if that, meaning the futuristic CD would have less time spent playing than your average homemade mixtape created by a grade school student. What a universe we live in. It's almost as unique and special as the mini one that was being built by The Simpsons in the gaming space. This franchise was essentially a partially good and partially bad tumor for the late 90s, early 2000s, releasing an absurd amount of titles, typically making their own spin-off of something else. One I've heard about a lot is Simpsons Skateboarding, that released during the obligatory make a game similar to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, or else your underling studios will fall victim to the bubonic plague window. So that means it's definitely worth a try. If you've handled one of Antonio Hawk's games before, or know what a skateboard is, it plays exactly as you'd expect it to. If you don't happen to know what a skateboard is, it's a slab of wood with wheels attached to the bottom, and you use it to do tricks, hoping you don't end your life while doing so. Of course, Simpsons Skateboarding makes a lot of those said tricks appear much easier to do in real life, because in the physical realm, you at least have full control over what you're doing. Here, they are incredibly specific with timing when you press the buttons, which is kinda strange considering how small the list of tricks is. Whenever you need to perform buckets of maneuvers to get points, you typically end up doing the same few repeatedly, and I assume this would be a deal breaker for some. For me, I don't really give the fattest log in the world about skateboarding. Even if this game had the most extravagant list of moves only found under a destroyed wagon when Moses split the Red Sea, I still would have feasted on my controller till the cows came home, the same way I did here. Honestly, I only wanted to give Simpsons Skateboarding a go since there are people who claim this is the worst Simpsons game to ever be released, and I do feel like that is a nonsensical statement. You know, Simpsons Wrestling is a thing, an easy golden trophy for that title. That game is a rotting carcass spinning on a chicken skewer, splattering bacteria all over the kitchen. When it comes to skateboarding, yeah, what you're experiencing is undoubtedly below Mr. Hawk's games, but there had to be at least a tiny bit of fun extracted out of this by one person out there. Skating around the park, trying to reach a high score, repeatedly grinding on rails or spinning in the air, ascending the goop-ass leaderboard to unlock new wheels. Then with the pseudo-open world, they'd be able to grind through, completing objectives called Kid Catcher when they're playing as a grown-ass man. I can't say I personally had fun with this. I just refuse to believe it belongs in the caliber of a game like Skateboarding Madness, where even if you are the skateboard warlord of your village, feared by the locals, you're still able to see how rotten this piece of junk is, and there's no reason for a single human on this planet, on Mars, or anywhere else to waste their time with it. Compared to this thing, Simpsons Skateboarding is an all-you-can-eat buffet. I'm not gonna say this is the worst Simpsons game. Simpsons Wrestling sucks. That's the real worst Simpsons game. It's a shame I wasted my time playing a game that I got hoodwinked into believing was a disgrace to our society. I could have been spending all that time grinding Garfield Kart instead. One of the most legendary video games to grace Earth, deemed to be one of, if not the worst kart racer ever made, and when you let it rip, starting up a race, watching your camera soar through reality, going into the ground, that mentality will be solidified right there and then. Also, when you see how they call laps rounds, that I'm guessing is a joke because you go around the track, it's a question that presumably doesn't have an answer, as with the questions surrounding the physics of Garfield Kart. When you're racing on any tracks that have you going off of ramps, if there's any turbo involved while you're ascending off that said jump, Jesus fully takes control of the wheel. You just need to hope your character decides they feel like staying on the track. And obviously, this aerial physics frustration doesn't mean the core wheels on the ground gameplay is any better. Regardless of the character you chose, the roads might as well be melted cheese with how challenging it is to drive on, likely being the reason for why all the tracks are flat, bland, uninspired, flavorless M&Ms. Although, in the scope of Garfield Kart, it's actually a good thing they're all slightly windy roads with hardly any deviation. If these streets were slightly more extravagant, Garfield Kart would genuinely be unplayable due to the endless nature of feeling as if your cart is going to catch fire and all the wheels will fall off at every turn. Either way, this is a mountain climb you'll need to find your own technique to harness, with an additive issue of leaving the player to use the last few bits of their brain remaining to remember each of the track's layouts, since apparently drawing out a squiggly line with real-time dots on it was too complex. We needed to go back decades before the inception of kart racing for this one. I do believe it's kinda important for players to understand what's coming up by giving them an actual minimap, rather than having them stare at a line that gives the most bare bones information. It's very strange how archaic Garfield Kart is. The game came out in 2013. There was a plethora of kart racers you could have used the eyes you were born with to look, then the brain we also have to compute the information, learning how to make one properly. But I guess they didn't feel like doing that. On top of the dirty gameplay we have that takes no more than an hour to fully complete, you have hardly anything to unlock. There's only hats or spoilers for your car that give you a negligible buff during your race that you earn by spelunking the tracks collecting blue puzzle pieces. Aside from this, you do not have a single lick on the popsicle to keep you motivated. So in their mind, this gameplay was supposed to be fully worth the money you spent and also enough to have players keep coming back for more. Which is sickening this group of swindlers had the audacity to believe such a thing. It got to the point I needed to scrape up a random kart racer from the early 2000s just to see if this is normal behavior. Can Shrek outclass Garfield like he could with Hulk in Shrek Smash and Crash Racing? Well, right when you turn it on, we get a few cutscenes where you stumble into a race shortly afterwards, and this thing is a piece of fucking steaming hot sidewalk carnival leftovers if I've ever seen it. I saddled up on whatever this creature is. I don't remember it from any of the Shrek movies. I'm guessing it's an exclusive for this game. Regardless of where it came from, Smash and Crash does in fact suffer from a lot of similar issues Garfield Kart has, like a bunch of pointless punk-ass unlocks. Except here, it's actually worse. None of the characters have unique stats from one another, and it has physics issues to where there are moments you can hardly grasp what is going on around you thanks to the chaos ensuing at all fronts. My favorite bone twister, though, is how the graphics for Smash and Crash are on par with Garfield Kart when it released in 2006. How nice is that? I seriously cannot begin to imagine how many of these Mario Kart dittos we have in this world, but a short trek through this swamp amongst many others dished out by various companies puts me under the impression there is no definitive worst kart racer ever made. Instead, there seems to be a 400,000 way tie, which is an impressive feat, I can't lie. You'd figure something so simple wouldn't be an endless train wreck. Apparently, the conductors of these titles do a monkey see, monkey do play, then leave it at that. The only silver lining for this conundrum for Garfield specifically is that he did make somewhat of a redemption for himself in 2025 with Garfield Kart 2 All You Can Drift. Now, I'm not saying this game is the ultimate driving experience where you'll be lambasting about it to family members and strangers, claiming you've partaken in one of the greatest racing events in history while sitting upon your throne in the comfort of your own home. It's just slightly more functional, not having issues with physics, while oddly trying to lean more into the joke of its existence. In the first Garfield Kart, they did actually try creating their own items to stand apart from Mario Kart, whereas Garfield Kart 2 didn't even try. They added the same coin mechanic as with making green, red, and blue food dishes that are clearly emulating the Mario Kart shells. Otherwise, the game is practically the same as the first. The release of Garfield Kart 2 is a very strange turn of events. I guess there are moments games can be so awful to the point people are having gatherings to crucify said game outside their town hall, pouring gasoline on it, then playing darts with lit matches. But it later becomes a meme to where a market is created for it, and a sequel becomes a reality because it's funny. I'm more than positive if a remaster for Ride to Hell Retribution came out, there would be people who flock to it, carving away at other store goers with a homemade shank to get their hands on a copy, which is probably how most of the publishers felt about these cartoon games before they released. Kids will become cannibals in hopes of playing Nickelodeon Party Blast. Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius will enter their household by any means necessary, even if they need to start slashing tires or putting sticks of dynamite down toilets. And there's most likely some truth to that. Surely parents bought these games for their children, and they sucked it up since the concept of knowing what a good game was didn't fully exist yet. I can say for certain I didn't have fun with any of them. Maybe others can say differently and I'm just missing the plot. I don't know. If you think one of these games is a holy grail in the space, please let me know down in the comments. Big ups to all of our channel members who go above and beyond each and every month, generously supporting the channel even further. If you would like to join them and get early access to content, hit the join button right next to the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, take very good care of yourselves, and I hope to see you all again in the next video.